Introducing the latest 3 for 2s at Boots.
A 1,000-year tradition of nobility, pomp and pageantry. An expensive anachronism or our most valuable national treasure? This Tuesday, the biggest live debate in the history of television tackles the most contentious issue of the decade. Do you want a monarchy? Hosted by a prestigious team. It's a night when you can vote on the future of the monarchy. The nation decides. This Tuesday at 8:30 on Granada. When Hollywood men and Hollywood women come together.
What is dating like in Hollywood?
You have to look a certain way.
Image is everything. So I think everyone leads their life as if they're being watched.
Celluloid glamour. Plastic surgery. Lots of money.
Isn't it sad?
Self-centered.
A lot of attitude.
Live it. I love it.
You like it?
Yes!
The place where anything goes.
Nothing in this town surprises me.
A brand new series, Hollywood Lovers, begins Wednesday at 9.
Here's looking at Humphrey Bogart, now on Granada, the subject of the South Bank Show.
The South Bank Show, in association with the Sunday Telegraph, the art of a perfect Sunday.
Of all the programmes in all the series and all the world, he walks into mine. Humphrey Bogart. The man who's consistently topped the polls as the greatest screen actor of all died exactly 40 years ago. Recently, his son, who'd spent most of his life trying to live down his heritage, decided to find out about his father. Chris Hunt's film uses a wealth of rare material alongside the famous films as he accompanies Stephen Bogart in his investigation into the life of his father, Humphrey Bogart.
My name is Humphrey Bogart, in case there are those of you in the audience who are either too young or too old to know who I am. I can't talk to you. Why? Because he's dead.
Bogart is a kind of quintessence of some idea of an American hero that reverberates throughout the world. It's a very strong cultural type.
Is he as cute as you are?
Nobody is.
What is your nationality?
I'm a drunkard.
He always thought that the world was 3 drinks behind, and if it caught up, the world would be a better place to live in.
He's looking at you, kid.
He really put the stamp on a new brand of romantic male lead that did not exist before Bogart started developing it.
Oh, that's better.
Bogart said it takes 15 years to build a star, but everyone is not a star. A star is someone who really lasts. You've got to last.
Until recently, Bogart's son, Stephen, had shown little interest in his father's life. The burden of being the son of a legend was simply too great.
Hello, Steve.
Bogart died when Stephen was only 8, so most of his knowledge of his father came from the image he saw on the screen. He was even named after the role Bogart played when he met Stephen's mother, Lauren Bacall, in the movie To Have and Have Not. Bogart was a distant figure, to whom it's been hard for Stephen to relate.
Steve, you're not sore, are you?
Bacall has told Stephen about him, of course, and how he wasn't the tough guy he often portrayed. His classic images show him as streetwise, coarse, and rough-edged, but in fact, that couldn't be further from his real-life upbringing. Bogart actually came from a background with money. He was born on Christmas Day, 1899, in an affluent area of New York.
My father was brought up well. His father was a doctor.
and his mother, my grandmother, was an internationally known illustrator, Maud Humphrey. In fact, one of her most famous illustrations was of my father as the Mellon baby. Mellon was a baby food company back in the early 1900s, and she used my father as the model, which Mellon used on their products.
He grew up headstrong and rebellious. He was suspended from Phillips Academy in 1918 for what he called youthful high spirits. He then joined the Navy, but his brief career was notable for long spells in the brig. His parents despaired of him, and eventually he drifted into theatre work.
I get the sense that he was a spoiled rich boy. He used family connections to get into, start his career after the war. The theatrical producer, William Brady, lived next door, and Alice Brady, his wife, was an actress, and so there was a kind of entree for him.
He began to get small roles as the juvenile love interest, for which his lack of height or good looks didn't suit him. His first ever reviews were typical and rankled enough to be remembered.
He said the young man who embodies the aforesaid sprig was what might mercifully be described as inadequate. And Alan Dale, whom you may remember, said that Mr. Bogart gave some rather trenchant examples of bad acting.
His lack of success led to a kind of desperation which upset many of his colleagues.
There were a lot of actors in New York that hated his guts, and I didn't know why for quite a while, and then I worked with him, and then I found out. He really loathed being an actor. He thought it was sissy. It was not something you did if you were a man, you know? And he was very angry that he was not a big hit.
His frustrations sometimes boiled over. In 1926, Bogart lost his temper and struck a fellow actress called Helen Menken. As happens in all the worst scripts, they then fell in love.
Helen Menken and Humphrey Bogart, married by a deaf-mute rector. Helen Menken, she was pretty cute.
She was a big star, a bigger star than Bogey, and people would say to him, you know, you're going to end up as the tail of the dog. Where she goes, you're going to have to follow. And unhappily, it turned out to be pretty true. She had an affair, Bogey found out about it, and they had a breakup and finally did get a divorce. It was a very short marriage, as I recall, only a year, or maybe even less.
Treated her cruelly and told her he did not love her. He probably didn't. Her husband's temper was violent, and he struck her. And then, former husband of Helen Menken to wed actress. I'm detecting a pattern here.
He married Mary Phillips in 1928, and they sometimes acted together on stage. But Bogart's sights were set on Hollywood, and he began getting small parts in forgettable movies.
Go on, get in that room and shut up.
He moved on from young lover to rookie gangster.
Okay. I'll bear that in mind.
It was as a gangster that his big break eventually came. Back on Broadway in 1936, without a movie contract, he appeared in a play called The Petrified Forest. The main star was Leslie Howard.
Plans were made to film The Petrified Forest, and of course, Warner's wanted to cast someone else other than Bogart, because Bogart was a film unknown, and Howard said, hey, Bogart's in it or I'm not, that's it. And with that kind of weight, they decided to sign your dad.
Tell us, Duke, what kind of a life have you had? What do you think? I spend most of my time since I grew up in jail. It looks like I spend the rest of my life dead.
He played too many pretty boys, let's say, when he was a young actor. And that's why he enjoyed playing the heavies that he played, because they gave him a chance to really cut loose some of his real feelings.
Just keep in mind that I and the boys is candidates for hanging. The first time any one of you makes a wrong move, I'm gonna kill the whole lot of you. But keep your seats.
Finally, at the age of 36, he'd arrived as a screen actor. He moved to Hollywood Jack Warner offered him a contract, albeit for a paltry $650 a week, and he was to stay at the studio for the next 15 years.
No. No. I'll do anything.
Oh, no, you won't.
Between 1936 and 39, Bogart appeared in 25 movies. He became expert at playing the bad guy, shooting people and getting shot at the end. He was the fourth in line on Warner's Murderers Row behind James Cagney, George Raft and Edward G. Robinson. But he hated the facile scripts and stereotyped roles he was always given and complained long and loud to Jack Warner.
One thing about him, he never, ever kept his mouth shut.
I've been aching to fill you full of slugs.
And so he'd go and say, this script is junk. I'm not going to do it.
I'll settle with you, you double-crook.
And Warner would say, you're going to have to do it. You've got a contract. And Bogey would probably shove a finger up in the air in a well-known gesture.
Eddie! Crazy! Eddie! Eddie!
One rap you won't beat.
Crazy!
Warner Brothers has suspended Humphrey Bogart from salary for refusing a leading role in Bad Men of Missouri. Oh, he's very lucky he did that.
What I care. You can't live forever.
Warner Brothers really didn't know what to do with him as an actor throughout his time there. And it may be that simply this notion of a one-dimensional type was something that they needed and wanted and couldn't deal with what he actually was.
What do you want here?
Oh, I'm Sam Spade, Tom Polhar's phone.
Oh, I didn't know you at first. Back there.
It took 5 years before Bogart got a part that gave him room to express himself as an actor. He seized his opportunity, but it might easily never have happened at all. He was given the part by default, not on merit.
Oh, thanks, Tom. What happened?
George Raft turned down the part because he didn't want to work with a first-time director named John Huston, which was one of the many decisions that, bad decisions that George Raft made in his career.
Bogart, to my secret delight, was substituted. And that picture began, I think, a whole new career for Bogey.
Now, let's see. Your first guess was that I had the bird. There's nothing to that. What's your second guess?
That you know where it is, or at least you know it is where you can get it.
You're not hiring me to do any murders or burglaries, but simply to get it back, if possible, in an honest, lawful way.
If possible, but,
Everything in that movie fits. It feels right. Bogart steps into that role, Sam Spade. He wears it like a suit of clothes. And the extra element is that this is the first time he'd been able to play a tough guy as an inherent good guy without losing any of the attractive qualities that he naturally felt as a tough guy.
I won't play the sap for you.
Oh, you know it's not like that. You can't say that.
You never played square with me for half an hour at a stretch since I've known you.
You know down deep in your heart that in spite of anything I've done, I love you.
I don't care who loves who. I won't play the sap for you. I won't walk in Thursby's, and I don't know how many other footsteps. You killed Miles, and you're going over for it.
His relationships with women were as turbulent off-screen as on. His second wife had left him, and he married another actress, Mayo Metho. But this time there was violence on both sides, and not caused by Bogart's career frustrations. Studio publicists dubbed them the Battling Bogarts, trying vainly to portray them as a volatile but loving couple.
Outwardly, it may seem that everybody's having a good time and it's no big deal. Inwardly, it's not. I mean, inwardly, there's a lot of turmoil and a lot of problems, and they would have killed each other. I mean, she stabbed him once, for gosh sakes. My wife just missed me with an ashtray. I don't know what's wrong with her aim lately, he said.
He had a carpenter on call in their house to repair the doors that she shot holes through. But Bogey once told me that the way she kept him was she got him drunk and kept him drunk. And I believe that's probably true. They drank together. And when they'd get drunk, they'd get hostile. He would say, every time she'd start to sing Embraceable You, he'd start to get out because he knew that she was going to get a gun or she was going to get something and come after him.
Mayo had an addiction, and it was very evident. Once we'd had a few drinks, and all of a sudden, Bogey said, "Sluggy, if you say that once more, I'm going to push you over." So she said it once more, and he leaned over and pushed her over. And she fell into the next table and onto the floor, and she was crying and yelling. And Bogey, I remember, turned to my husband and said, "Well, wouldn't you have?" And my husband said, "Well, not necessarily so."
Did he do that?
Yeah, he went crazy.
It was his relationship with the battered woman that was at the center of his next important role, as Roy Earl, the soft-hearted gangster.
Give me that. You stay here.
Oh, Roy, you'll only get yourself in a jam,
Shut
please.
up and lock this door behind me.
Bogart needed an extra element to his persona to make him stand out from the crowd. And he needed to get in touch with a nobility, a vulnerability, a romanticism within that tough guy role.
What you ought to do is put a bullet through his head. You ain't got enough trouble without a fool dog.
When he got the part of Roy Earl and he showed that he could be humorous and that he could play a different role than the type he'd played before, it was the transition from the gangster role to a wide variety of roles which he would end up playing.
For all the 14-carat sap, starting out on a caper with a woman and a dog. If he spoils this job,
Oh, you're full of talk.
He recognized that this was a way for not only him to grow as an actor, but for his persona to grow. And really, after that movie, there's no looking back. It really forged the Bogart that we recognize.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
The defining Bogart role followed 2 years later in 1943. It was to turn him into one of the greatest of screen icons. In fact, it was so good that George Raft later claimed it too had been offered to him first. It hadn't.
Well, I don't think I can remember.
If she can stand it, I can. Play it.
Yes, boss.
During production, there were no signs at all that the movie was headed for greatness.
In those days, the studios made a picture a week. And Casablanca was just another picture coming off the assembly line. It was they had no more regard for it, or less regard for it than any other of the 49 pictures.
The scripts kept changing every day, and they kept coming back, and they'd rewrite every single day. So it was a difficult film for him to do, but the main thing that the studios had to deal with was the fact that they didn't think that he could get the girl. And he had a very difficult time with Ingrid Bergman and dealing with that relationship and being a sex symbol because he was never thought of that way.
The day you left Paris, if you knew what I went through, if you knew how much I loved you, how much I still love you.
See, Bogart in himself is not a very romantic figure. He needs to have his romanticism, his attractiveness reflected in the actress who's playing opposite him. You get somebody like Bergman who just swoons when you put the camera on her, and there's interesting stuff going on there.
If that plane leaves the ground and you're not with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life.
But what about us?
We'll always have Paris. We didn't have, we lost it until you came to Casablanca.
I feel that he really rises to the occasion. It's really one of the great moments of his career in that scene. He gives what he could not give before, some sense of nuance and expression of pain and love and sorrow. It's all there.
I've got a job to do, too. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of.
Ilsa, I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that. Now. He's looking at you, kid.
I just wish I could have been in Ingrid Bergman's shoes in Casablanca. There's maybe no better romantic story ever done. To me, that's the epitome of Bogey's work. He was awesome, let's face it.
Suddenly, he was acclaimed as one of the great screen actors of his time. At the age of 43, he'd achieved his ambition. But his attitude to stardom was ambiguous. His reputation was now greater than any other actor could measure up to, so he could afford to seem indifferent to it.
I don't think he gave a damn about stardom. I really don't think that concerned him a bit. He was totally uninterested in all of that, what Katharine Hepburn would call bunkum. Absolute nonsense.
I think he cared. What interested him was let on that he didn't. That was part of the Bogart facade. He cared very much, so he pretended he didn't, and acted outrageously occasionally to prove it, but that didn't prove it.
You would meet him, and the first thing that he would do would be to put you off. And that was a defense mechanism. That comes from years of being alone, from years of being in unhappy relationships, in my opinion. But that was he was very difficult to get close to, and he wouldn't let you get close.
It was very hard to know what he was thinking ever. And he could be charming when he wanted to be charming, and he could be a bastard when he wanted to be a bastard. And he just did whichever one was coming up.
The first time he met Sinatra, he said, Frank, I hear you have a voice that makes girls faint. Make me faint. And he met Steinbeck, who, of course, is one of the great writers of all time. And he said to him, Hemingway tells me you're not a good writer. He was a loner. He was a lonely man, I think. And I think that was part of the problem. And when he got famous and when he started to really get big, he was in his late 30s. But there was still that loneliness there until he met my mother when he was 43.
Anybody got a match?
Bogart met his future fourth wife, Miss Betty Bacall, when she became his co-star.
Thanks.
Who's that?
The first, 3-4 weeks that we were working on the film, we were just working on the film and just having a very good time. But certainly there was no romance of any kind. That just accidentally just kind of happened, much to my amazement, and I suppose his as well.
If you say, here's the greatest actor, highest paid actor of his time, and here's the sinewy, gorgeous 19-year-old model, and you get them together, and you use every cliche you could possibly use regarding that relationship. It was her first movie, he's the movie star, they fall in love on screen, they have to change the movie because it's so obvious that he's going to get the girl. I think that it was the stuff that dreams are made of.
What'd you do that for?
Been wondering whether I'd like it.
What's the decision?
I don't know yet.
I think a lot of the excitement of that movie is watching Bacall unleashed and watching Bogart react to her. And it's Howard Hawks saying to Bogart, this little girl is going to do something she's going to make you very, very angry.
He wanted me to be the kind of woman that he had always, I suppose, fantasized about and dreamed of. A woman who behaved kind of like a man, who was as arrogant as a man, as tough as a man, and yet was a woman.
You don't have to say anything, and you don't have to do anything. Not a thing. Oh, maybe just whistle. You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.
Bogey said, we're going to have a lot of fun. Little did I know how much fun we were going to have.
Ever felt misled by some holiday brochures?
What's this? It's meant to be a family-sized room.
That's what the brochure said.
Housekeeping.
Thomson's new summer sun brochure shows the scores you give our holidays for as honest a picture as possible.
O sublime queen of breathtaking beauty, I can but marvel at your radiance and warmth, and from the abundant gifts you have bestowed upon your people. It is no wonder to me that Aphrodite herself was raised against your gentle shores.
Cyprus. Fall in love.
There is a powerful remedy for the 4 main symptoms of flu that is now also available as a hot drink. Benylin 4 Flu has the power to reduce a fever, relieve aches and pains, soothe coughing, combat congestion, and so aid restful sleep. Available without prescription. New Benylin 4 Flu hot drink for powerful flu relief.
What? Big as a shed?
Much bigger.
Big as the lighthouse?
Loads bigger.
Big as the Halifax vote.
Yep.
The old liar!
Tony, tell them.
Be a part of something big. The Great Big Halifax Vote coming soon.
Well, whatever it was, it just sucked me out of my cab like a whelk. Yeah, and now, this is what you might find hard to grasp. It was the same size as a slimline dishwasher. But the room inside, why, you could nearly fit the spare tire from an 18-wheeler in there. Then, a voice said, we recommend Finish double-action tablets for superior cleaning.
There's a new C9 place-setting slimline dishwasher, the appliance of science.
Introducing the latest 3 for 2s at Boots.
My name's Marlowe. He's expecting me.
Just wait here and I'll find out.
Humphrey Bogart capitalized on the success of his pairing with Lauren Bacall by teaming up again for The Big Sleep.
I'm telling you, mister, she was a sob sister. Sob sister, lying on a pillow.
By now, his confidence as a romantic hero was so well-founded that every woman in the cast seemed to fall for him.
And her tears flowed like wine. Yes, her tears flowed like wine.
Hello.
Hello. You go too far, Marlowe.
But it was the electricity between Bogart and Bacall that gave the film its life.
I like that. I'd like more.
There was only one problem. Bogart was in love with Bacall, but still married to Mayo Metho. And splitting up with someone as unbalanced and violent as she was promised to be traumatic and dangerous.
I wanted to encourage him to believe that he could have a life because I had heard terrible stories about Mayo Metho. And I had been warned that she might drop a lamp on my head and all this. And Bogey was terribly worried about my being damaged and that he would never allow anything to happen that would hurt me. And so he was filled with his own adult emotions while I was this infant.
You're the one who's shaking now.
I'm scared, Angel.
He was very much involved with Lauren Bacall. He had moved out partially from his home. He was drinking very heavily. You get this evidence simply from the Big Sleep daily production reports about Bogart arriving drunk or hungover or arriving late or not being prepared. So it's very much a crisis moment for him.
I don't know yet what I'm going to tell him, but it'll be pretty close to the truth.
You've forgotten one thing. Me.
What's wrong with you?
Nothing you can't fix.
And in May 1945, Bogart did fix it. He divorced Mayo without anyone getting shot, and 11 days later, married an actress for the 4th time.
I thought the relationship between Betty and Bogey was volatile, but deeply committed to each other. And I think he enjoyed Betty, and Betty represented a challenge to him. Although they fought, I've seen them have big fights about things, but they really were devoted to each other.
He'd never had kind of a real married life. And, I mean, the first few years, we had the most wonderful time. It was a real 3-year honeymoon.
Bogart had found real happiness, and for the first time in his life, it proved lasting. They traveled in Europe together and made 2 more movies. But by the time of Key Largo in 1948, the previous spark seemed to have dulled a little. After all, they weren't secret lovers anymore, but an established married couple.
Storm's passing.
Torn shutter or two, some trash on the beach. In a few hours, there'll be little to remind you of what happened tonight.
The relationship between Bogart and Bacall's character in Key Largo is kind of on the back burner. It kind of is pro forma. It feels a little rote. It's not in the forefront of the movie. It's not where the main action is going on. It's in there because you have to have a romantic relationship going on with the hero and the girl that he wins. I find it interesting to look at how Bogart tried to refine and hold on to his romantic tough guy image as he grew older.
You cast off that bow line. Stand by that stern line. Okay, let it
go. One way in which Key Largo succeeded was in developing Bogart's key image, the good guy who's as tough as the bad guys.
You can really see it as a battle between the 30s gangster, the 30s movie gangster, and the new film noir 40s movie gangster. Between the absolute nasty, nail-spitting, tough guy with a gun, ugly, fish-faced Edward G. Robinson, and the new, tough, but noble, but honorable, sensitive, but he'd never show it, but you know it's there, Humphrey Bogart. And who wins? Of course, Humphrey Bogart. That's the direction of the future.
Mayday. Mayday. Mayday, Santana. I'm about 12 miles off Boot Key Harbor on my way in. I need medical attention. Over.
Where'd you learn about boats?
My first sweetheart was a boat. Hey, how do you like that boat? Nice craft. She ought to be away from those reefs with this blow coming up. Is that so?
Bogart loved the sea. At the time of Key Largo, he bought himself a yacht and called it the Santana.
Glad I'm not filing over there.
Sailing was how he recharged his spirits, and this was a magnificent craft which still sails the California waters today.
I understand he spent 45 weekends of the year out on the boat. I think he told Lauren Bacall that he was at her disposal from Sunday night until Thursday evening, and then from then on, he was out on the boat. You had to be able to swim, and I think you had to be able to drink.
It was a man's thing for him. As he said, if women are on the boat, you can't pee over the side. He didn't want anybody putting any limits on him. And that was his escape, that was his recreation, that was his passion. He loved acting, and he was a student of it, and he cared about it a lot. But this was his real passion, and he was a brilliant sailor. I mean, he won a lot of Catalina races, and he was not a journeyman, he was a champion. Unless you really understand the water, and understand the reason for being on it, and understand the love of sailing and the feeling of quietness and solitude, you don't really belong on a boat anyway. I think Hemingway said one time, the sea was the last free place on earth.
Are you a member of the Communist Party? Or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
It's unfortunate and tragic that I have to teach this committee the basic principles of Americanism.
That's not the question.
In 1947, the House Un-American Activities Committee began to call Hollywood to account for its supposed communist connections. Bogart was one of the many who were outraged, believing that their politics were none of Congress's business.
All of us knew members that had been named, and I think that Lauren had a lot more social conscience than Bogart. But she imparted that to him, and he took up the cause, too.
The final days of the hearings also saw a group of prominent film personalities fly in from Hollywood, led by Humphrey Bogart. They came to demonstrate against what they felt was an unfavorable impression of their field.
We were all so naive, it was ridiculous. We went to Washington, didn't know anything about this political thing. We went on an emotional level. You know, that you have the right to speak and to say what you are and be what you are, and you don't have to be condemned for that. You shouldn't be thrown out of work for that. So we went there, and of course it was kind of a farce in a way, because we were in the middle of something that we didn't know anything about.
Or to seriously curtail it.
The group of 10 Hollywood figures the Bogarts had gone to support failed to proclaim the right to free speech. They meekly refused to answer questions, and the witch hunt continued.
I believe I have the right to be confronted with any evidence which supports this question.
People involved with the Unfriendly 10, as they became known, were starting to get blacklisted from the industry themselves. And my father wrote a letter distancing himself from the Unfriendly 10.
He claimed he was let down by the Ten's cowardly silence. His colleagues felt outraged and betrayed.
He felt he was misled, and other people felt he chickened out. And he definitely was misled, and he definitely chickened out. Humphrey Bogart appeared before Chairman Martin Dies of the House Un-American Activities Committee at his own requests, and denied he was a heavy contributor to the Communist Party.
I regard it as a mistake that Bogey did this. He should have stuck to his guns, but I quite understand why he didn't. No one, literally no one, had the courage to speak up. At that time, everyone was intimidated. scared out of their wits.
What's the matter, Dobbsy? Why don't you stick your hand right in and get your treasure? Couldn't be because you're scared to, could it, after the way you've been shooting your mouth off? Sure she ain't yellow, Dobbsy. I'd hate to think that my partner had a yellow streak up his back.
I'll kill you, you dirty thieving!
When John Huston worked with Bogart again a few months later, he cast him as a craven, unprincipled thief who'd attack his partners to protect his hoard of money. It wasn't a role he relished.
Treasure of the Sierra Madre he was not going to do, but his agent, Sam Jaffe, talked to him and said, Bogey, you really have to do this. John Huston, who was the director, really needs you to do this. It's a vehicle for his father, Walter Huston. And you guys have been together and done a lot of things together. And my father said, okay, I'll do it for John Huston. And the result is one of the great films, I think his greatest film, and I think his greatest role is Fred C. Dobbs. I mean, my father is Fred C. Dobbs.
Yeah! The cards are dealt the other way now, and for the last time, no more shuffling. What cards you talking about? I'm gonna finish this right now. No more taking orders from you like I had to do today, get me? You mean you're gonna murder me? No, brother, not murder, no. Your mistake. I'm doing this to save my life, that you'd be taken from me the minute I wasn't looking at you. Up, march. Today I had to march to your music, now you'll march to mine. Where? To your funeral.
Bogart's relationship with his director was as stormy as it was with his co-star.
They had a mutual love and admiration, and at the same time, occasionally they wanted to kill each other because they were both very strong-willed individuals. They sort of enjoyed the contest between the two of them.
Huston was very, very meticulous. He would keep filming and do shot after shot after shot, take after take after take. And my father had a boat race that he needed to go to. And Huston ordered another take, and my father said, I'm not doing it, I'm leaving, I want to go to the boat race. And Huston leaned over and he said, you're gonna stay. And he gave him a little tweak in the nose, and he kind of twisted his nose a little bit. My father and him were getting it on. But my father stayed, and they finished the film.
Give us some money. Yeah. Give us our money. 200. 300. That's it, ain't it, Kurt? Yeah, that's it.
Bogart's next production took place at home. He'd moved into a new house with Lauren Bacall and was enjoying the new domesticity that she brought him. In 1949, only one thing was missing.
When my mother announced that she was pregnant, that was the completion of the puzzle, and that scared him because he was a guy who basically did what he wanted to do. He didn't have to deal with anybody else. He didn't have to worry about anyone else. Now he had responsibilities for people other than himself. Love responsibilities, and he didn't really know probably how to deal with those feelings, and he didn't expect that those feelings would ever come about.
He was an uneasy father and seemed in awe of what he produced. But miracle though he may have been, Stephen wasn't allowed to disrupt the way Bogart ran his life. When he went to Africa for another film with John Huston, Bogart insisted on bringing Lauren Bacall with him, leaving their 2-year-old son behind. The African Queen, in which he played opposite his great friend Katharine Hepburn, turned out to be a challenging movie. Huston had chosen to film it in a remote part of the Belgian Congo.
Waiting for that duffer, man.
Bogey was never a man to enjoy going to remote places. And the very fact that he'd go off on these forays with me was an indication of his affection for me and willingness to sacrifice for his art.
I think John wants to shoot in probably the most inaccessible part because he likes to shoot where it's almost impossible to shoot. If he could get a camera on top of Mount Everest, he'd have one there, believe me.
If Bogart found the experience uncomfortable, to Katharine Hepburn it was a great adventure.
My wife was on Katie's side, and they were both on John Huston's side. I guess I was the only one who thought it was too hot and too damp, and why were we there? So I just drank my scotch and griped.
Is something the matter, Mr. Allnut? Tell me.
Nothing. Nothing you don't understand.
They said the reason they stayed well is that they had plenty of booze sent down there. And John was a bigger drinker than Bogey, but didn't seem to bother him. He could stay up all night and drink and work all day the next day, and nobody knew the difference. So I think they both used alcohol to fight off the dysentery, and they seemed to be successful at it.
All this foolish talk about the Louisa going down the river.
What do you mean?
I mean, we ain't gonna do nothing of the sort.
Of course we are. What an absurd idea.
What an absurd idea. What an absurd idea. Lady, you got 10 absurd ideas for my one.
Hollywood turns out for the Oscar Award.
For his role as Charlie Allnut, Bogart won what he thought he'd never achieve and had always said he didn't want, an Oscar.
For best performance by an actor.
When he got the award, I thought he would be delighted by it and amused by it, but he was profoundly affected by it. And his talents were so widely recognized, why, it gave him great satisfaction.
He was now the man who seemed to have everything he could want. The more so when his second child, Leslie, was born in 1952 to complete the Bogart family unit. He'd even won independence from the dictatorial Jack Warner. Bogart now had his own production company, named Santana Pictures, after his yacht. Though the movies he'd produced were not his best, it allowed him to select his own roles and spread his wings as an actor in romances, thrillers, and comedies.
What marks him in the post-war period is his desire, his willingness to be versatile, to try out new parts. He was someone who, at this point in his career, obviously freed from the shackles of the Warner Brothers one-dimensional type, really seems to be committed to doing new and unusual things.
In his portrayal of a paranoid ship's captain, Bogart was prepared to examine the downside of his image of toughness, the collapse that ensues when it cracks.
Lieutenant Merrick was the perfect officer, but not Captain Queeg. Ah, but the strawberries, that's where I had them. They laughed at me and made jokes, but I proved beyond the shadow of a doubt and with geometric logic that a duplicate key to the wardrobe icebox did exist. And I'd have produced that key if they hadn't pulled the Caine out of action. I know now they were only trying to protect some fellow officer. And if I've left anything out, why, just ask me specific questions and I'll be glad to answer them one by one.
Bogart's reputation for hard living extended off-screen as well as on, with occasional justification. He and Bacall used to meet friends like Frank Sinatra, Angie Dickinson, David Niven, and Joe Hyams at Romanov's restaurant, where they founded the infamous drinking group, the Rat Pack.
At Romanov's one night, they hit on an idea of a group, a kind of a clan, if you will. And they were going to be the Rat Pack, and to be a rat, you had to undergo certain ritualistic kind of things that were all nonsense. And the day after that, as luck would have it, I was having lunch with your parents, and Betty or Bogey mentioned this Rat Pack and gave me the whole list of qualifications to be a rat. To be a rat, you really had to be a stinker at this time.
Pranks all the time. They'd stink bombs going and always trying to outdo the other as far as some great gag to pull.
He went to the El Morocco with a couple of people, including a couple of pandas, actually. Stuffed pandas, not real ones. And he meets two young ladies. One of the women comes over and starts, needling my father and wants to sit down. And my father finally says, get away from me. I got to get out of here. And he gets up, and they get into a little match, and he pushes her down because she's trying to come at him, and he kind of fends her off. And the next day, Bogey thrown out of El Morocco, woman sues him. Sworn out by a freelance model, quote unquote. She charged the actor pushed and knocked her down after she playfully attempted to pick up a 20-pound stuffed panda toy.
Here's a telegram from John Perona of El Morocco to Humphrey Bogart. Stay out of my fucking joint.
Somehow, it was all too good to last. In 1956, his constant drinking and smoking finally caught up with him.
At the dinner table, Bogart took out a small vial, sort of like a cocktail glass, filled with a thick white liquid, and he would take quick gulps, about every 10 minutes. And finally somebody said, "Bogey, what is that?" He says, "What's wrong?" He says, "What's wrong?" with a big smile. "I have cancer, that's what's wrong." And it was obvious at the time that he didn't think he had cancer, but that's what it turned out to be.
He didn't stop smoking. He didn't stop drinking. You know, he would still have his cocktails. He would still want his friends to come over. And every day, evening around 4:30, 5 o'clock, he would be loaded by the gardener, Aurelio, into the dumbwaiter, which is a kind of an elevator, an old-time elevator. And he would come in the dumbwaiter, and he would be lowered down and rolled out onto into the living room. And there he would greet his flock.
He entertained them, he told them stories, and he joked, and he lasted as long as he could, and then he would have to go back upstairs again. But he had unbelievable strength, willpower to make this happen because the body was failing very noticeably in the end.
I was aware that he was sick, but I wasn't aware that he was dying. And this was one of the problems. Never talked about death, never wanted my mother to talk about death, never allowed us to face the fact and to grieve for him until after he was gone. There was no last words, there was no message, and he was sick for a year. So consequently, I think it became as a one day, Steve, your father's dead. And it was boom, like that.
On January the 14th, 1957, aged 57, Humphrey Bogart died. The funeral was held at All Saints Episcopal, Beverly Hills. All Hollywood seemed to have turned out for it, and the loss was devastating to Stephen and Lauren Bacall.
It took me a lot of years before I could deal with it. I remember a lot of funny times and good times, and which is what he would have liked, and all of the pluses, because he was a rare human being. And that's why I believe he will live forever, because there was something about him as a man that permeated everything he did. And I think it reaches every generation. And I think that's why. And that and the fact that he did not ever get old, I think are the two reasons that kids identify with him and always will. It'll go on forever. He would never have believed that.
He'd asked for his ashes to be scattered at sea, which really was his spiritual home. His restless nature was well understood by John Huston, who gave the funeral eulogy.
To begin with, he was endowed with the greatest gift a man can have, talent. The whole world came to recognize it. Bogey got all that he asked for out of life and more. We have no reason to feel any sorrow for him, only for ourselves for having lost him. He is quite irreplaceable. There'll never be another like him.
What finding out about my father has done has first calmed me, because I can now put him in a place other than the image on the screen. I can see him laughing, I can see him smiling, I can hear him talking. And, you know, I didn't start finding out until a couple of years ago. But all that time, it seemed as though I was running here and running there and really didn't have a sense of who I was. So I think this has cemented who I am regarding my family, and certain things that I've gotten from him, the needling and the caring and a lot of the things that I've gotten from him. I'm kind of a loner kind of person. I don't let people get too close. And those are the big things that have changed me.
Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of. Ilsa, I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that. Now. Here's looking at you, kid.
You must remember this, a kiss is just a kiss, a sigh is just a sigh. The fundamental things apply as time goes by. And when two lovers woo, they still say I love you. On that you can rely. No matter what the future brings as time goes by.
Sam, I thought I told you never to play.
The South Bank Show, in association with the Sunday Telegraph, the art of a perfect Sunday.
A new season of films on Granada.
I want a dog.
Hilarious comedy.
Hey, Powder Puff, how about you and me nosing through the garbage together?
Ugh, what cat dragged you in?
Family entertainment.
Are you mad at me?
Oh, why?
Laughter and tears. Love and friendship.
Our fugitive has been on the run for 90 minutes. Go get him.
Action and adventure with a new season of films on Granada.
Playing for charity, we catch up with our snooker players next in the closing frames of the tournament.
Who would I most like to have a one-to-one with?
It's gotta be Elvis Presley!
56 would be a cool year. He'd be 21. Apparently, he really felt lonely at times, even before he was idolised by millions. I'd cheer him up. It would be great to go for a drive with him, pop round his mum's for a cup of tea. I'd ask him who was his best friend. I'd have been a good friend to him, I think. Maybe I'd ask him to sing for me, my own private Elvis Presley concert.
Who would you most like to have a one-to-one with?
Starting in the 10p Times tomorrow, a new diet guide individually tailored to your needs to cleanse your system for the year ahead. The Discovery Diet Guide, a new health regime only in the 10p Times tomorrow.
30,000 people really do win in every Reader's Digest prize draw. So win it, don't bin it.
It's the same story every winter. Same coughs and colds. Same icy winds. Same delayed trains. But this is not the same. Soup creations from bachelors. A new way of cooking pasta and beans and tomatoes and onions, all in a special rich stock. Create the same warm feeling with a very different soup. Soup creations from bachelors.
It takes 140 days of sunshine to make a morning as beautiful as this. So whatever you get up to Kellogg's Corn Flakes.
On an ordinary day, a child's bright laughter fills the air. One loving word, one loving glance, the sunshine everywhere. Your Werther's is his Werther's too, so glistening with its golden glow, so sweet and creamy, a taste so good. You're so alike, the two of you. Werther's and that feeling that you never will forget. When one who loves you says to you, you're someone very special too.
Every day, our vast network of sewers and treatment works collects and treats the equivalent of 288 million toilet flushes. Everything you expect and more for around 60 pence a day.
Thinking of buying a mobile phone? Then have a one-to-one with us. We provide a free phone information line 24 hours a day. Call us on 0500 500 121.
Monday action on Granada. There's someone new on the beat in San Francisco.
Oh, you are so clever, aren't you?
Are you okay?
You did that on purpose.
Probably.
Don Johnson is Detective Nash Bridges.
You boys are under arrest, so the best thing for you to do is surrender.
A man who meets the bad guys head on and wins.
Personally, I can't wait.
Nash Bridges, Monday at 10:40 on Granada.
The Liverpool Victoria Charity Challenge comes to a close now on Granada with highlights from the final day.